debate, I'm going to defend two basic contentions. First, that there's no good argument that atheism is true. And secondly, that there are good arguments that theism is true. Now, note that atheism is true. Atheists have tried for centuries to disprove the existence of God, but no one's ever been able to come up with a successful argument. So, rather than attack straw men at this point, I'll just wait to hear Mr. Hitchens present his arguments against God's existence, and then I'll respond to them in my next speech. In the meantime, reasons to think that what is normally called atheism is true, that is to say, the belief that God does not exist. Mr. Hitchens withholds belief in God, but he's unable to give us any argument to think that God does not exist, which is what is called positive atheism.
Right. And Dr. Craig said it in print, that atheists think they can prove the non-existence of God. This, in fact, very slightly but crucially misrepresents what we've always said. There's nothing new about the new atheists, it's just we're recent. There's no more convincing reason, certainly no evidential one, to believe that there is such an entity and that all observable phenomena, including the cosmological one to which I'm coming, are explicable without the hypothesis. You don't need the assumption. The logical problem here, which may conceal more than just terminological difficulty, the proposition that atheism is true, or that is a misstatement of what I have to prove and what we believe. There's an argument among some of us as to whether we need the word at all. In other words, I don't have a special name for my unbelief in tooth fairies, say, or witches, or in Santa Claus. I just don't think that they're there. I don't have to prove a tooth fairyism. I don't have to prove a Santa Clausism. I don't have to prove a witchism. It's just, I have to say, I think that those who do believe these things have never been able to make a plausible or intelligible case for doing so. That's not agnosticism, because it seems to me that if you don't think there is any evidence, you're wrong to take refuge in saying you're neutral. You ought to have the courage to answer the question, which one is regularly asked, are you an atheist or not? Yes, I will say, I am. You can't tell anything else about me. You can't tell anything else about what I think, about what I believe, about what my politics are, or my other convictions. It's just that I don't believe in the existence of a supernatural dimension, and I've never been shown any evidence that any process observable to us cannot be explained by more satisfactory and more convincing means. You
redefine atheism to mean a sort of atheism or non-theism.
That's what it means.
But how do you distinguish then the different varieties of non-theism? For example, what is normally called atheism, agnosticism, or the view of verificationists that the statement God exists is simply meaningless?
Well, I mean, there are different schools of atheism, as you say, but there's no claim I know how to make that says atheism is true, because atheism is the statement that a certain proposition isn't true. So I wish you'd get this bit right, because it's there you go again.
Well,
I just devoted a little time to this. I said it is not in itself a belief or a system. It simply says you can get by better, probably, we think, without the assumption that no one who wants you to worship a God has ever been able to come up with a good enough reason to make you do it. To believe and prove to a certainty. He's not just saying there might be a God, because he has to say there must be one, otherwise we couldn't be here and there couldn't be morality. It's not a contingency for him. I have to say that I appear as a skeptic who believes that doubt is the great engine, the great fuel of all inquiry, all discovery, and all innovation, and that I doubt these things. The disadvantage, it seems to me, in the argument goes to the person who says, no, I know it, it must be true, it is true. We are too early in the study of physics and biology, it seems to me, to be dealing in certainties of that kind, especially when the stakes are so high. It seems to me, to put it in a condensed form, extraordinary claims, such as the existence of a divine power with a son who cares enough to come and redeem us, extraordinary claims require truly extraordinary evidence. I don't think any of the evidence we heard from from Dr. Craig, brilliantly marshaled as it was extraordinary enough to justify the extreme claims that are being made and backed by it.
As Mr. Hitchens recognizes, eventually the universe will grow cold, dilute, dark, and dead as it runs down toward maximum entropy and heat death, and all human existence and life will be extinguished on an atheistic view of the future of the universe. There is no purpose for which the universe exists. The litter of a dead universe will just expand into the endless darkness forever, a universe in ruins. Now, of course, one can still live one's life as an illusion, thinking, well, the purpose of life is to, say, hit 40 home runs and steal 40 bases every year, in the major leagues, and you draw the meaning of your existence from that. But that's not really the meaning of your existence. That's just a subjective illusion. In fact, your existence on atheism is objectively meaningless. So that's the distinction that I was making. Again, it's between objective and mere subjective illusion.
Well, I think it has it exactly the wrong way around. You see, as I was beginning to say earlier, we didn't have time in the question period. I wouldn't say that atheism was morally inferior. I wouldn't concede that for a second. I don't want to make a claim for its superiority either, but there may be a slight edge here. We don't believe anything that could be called wishful. In other words, we don't particularly welcome the idea of the annihilation either of ourselves as individuals, the party will go on and will have left and we're not coming back, or of the entropic heat death of the universe. We don't like the idea, but there's a good deal of evidence to suggest that that is what's going to happen. And there's very, very little evidence to suggest that I'll see you all again in some theme park. One nice and one nasty experience. There's absolutely no evidence for that at all. So I'm willing to accept, on the evidence, conclusions that may be unwelcome to me. I'm sorry if I sound as if I'm spelling that out, but I will. Now, you want to know what makes my life meaningful? Generally speaking, it's been struggling myself to be free, and if I can say it without immodesty, Mr. Hewitt kindly said it for me, too flatteringly beforehand, but trying to help others to be free too. That's what's given a lot of meaning to my life and does still, the solidarity with those who want to be as free as I am, partly by luck and partly by my own efforts and the efforts of others. Well, one obstacle to liberty, and that's why I mentioned it, and gave so many examples of it in history and in the present day, is the poisonous role played by fellow primates of mine who think they can tell me what to do in the name of God because God's told them that they have this power. So that's one thing I'd like to be shot of right here in the here and now. And my suspicion is, if you really ask the religious, where do they want power? And what's the world they care about? The next one or this one? It'll be this one every time, because they too know perfectly well that this is the only life we've got.